Alright guys, it's a knife review time. Starting off this channel, I've been talking about doing it for a long time and just kind of been dragging my feet on it. But a really cool guy here in the knife community on YouTube, NeptuneKnives, he's put out a awesome contest that I'm sure is going to get a ton of entries. But what he's asked is we do a knife review kind of to his format and follow kind of his guidelines on it. And he's going to pick, I believe, 5 people. And then out of those 5, he's going to have them all do a second knife review, and out of that choose one winner for an awesome prize. I won't say what it is, but head over to his channel and check out his contest there. So what I have in front of me here is the one of the knives that is not as common out there. I mean, there's definitely a couple knife reviews on YouTube with this knife, but there's not a whole lot of them out there, so decided to pick this one because it's a little bit unique and maybe not as common. So this is a Hogue knife, as you can see here, folding knife extreme series by Hogue, and this particular model is made by Mr. Alan Olishwitz, and I believe he made a couple models for Columbia River as well. There's a few knives of his over there that I've also liked, and when I saw this one here I was really stoked about it and found it at a good price. I am Canadian, so don't mind the accent here as we go. So first things first, let's have a look at the blade. Now this is a black aluminum handle, and I believe they're calling it some sort of aircraft aluminum, basically T6 aircraft aluminum or something like that. But the blade length on this guy here is 4 inches, and the overall length is 9 inches. So this is a pretty good size blade. Blade material is 154 cm, although that's not stamped anywhere on the blade, and just really cool. I mean, it's a nice drop point blade. Very cool design. I like it quite a bit. As you can see here, compared to my phone case, it's not as black. You kind of see it's almost like a charcoal, dark charcoal gray color almost, but I really like it. Kind of sets it apart. I mean, we've got a lot of black knives, everybody pretty much, and so just kind of neat. So it is aircraft aluminum handle. Does have a little bit of weight to it, but feels good in the hand, and really smooth on the button lock here. Try and back it up a little bit for you. Deployment's really nice. So really cool knife. So first of all, I think the concept of this here is just the kind of a heavy duty folder. So you can see the stock is pretty thick. I'm not too sure the exact measurement here, but it's a decent size. I mean, this is a pretty beefy knife. I mean, this is kind of somewhere in the line of the military, I would imagine. A couple other knives. Actually, really quickly here, I'll show it in comparison to, that's the full-size Griptilian on top there, and maybe throw in the Sage, and so you can see it's a pretty decent knife. I mean, it's got some good size to it, and just a little bit of insight there. This is the Benchmade 707 sequel on top, and if I do get chosen to do a second knife review, I'm going to do it on this 707. So please pick me there, Neptune. So moving along, we'll kind of look at this. So the first section of his review wants us to look at utility. So concept, what is the knife's concept? I mean, this is a pretty heavy duty knife. It's a good size knife. Deployment is nice. I think the concept on this is probably more in line with a tactical blade. Could be used easily and flex the role kind of maybe bushcrafting or hiking knife as well. EDC, depends who you are, I suppose, but for me this might be a little large for EDC. It's a really nice blade here though. Take a look at this top swedge. And as you can see right here on the spine, it says Hogue. The other side is going to have Mr. Olishwitz name there, if we can get it to focus. There we go. And just says USA on the blade. So really uncluttered knife. Very, very nice. So for the utility, the concept, I mean, for what it is, the way it feels, I mean, I think that the concept around this, extreme knife series, I think kind of what they're going for is pretty accurate. So I would give, you know, 3 out of 3 on the concept there. Let's talk construction. Now, as I said, it is a button lock, so it does deploy relatively smooth. You know, construction, well, you got a 154 blade steel, and my experience with that has been, you know, it's held up very well. I haven't had any real issues sharpening 154. It's been a good steel to me. It's not too hard. So when you do have to touch it up, I mean, that's kind of part of it. It's not one of these super steels, but this is something that I think the average guy can sharpen. It's fairly resistant to the elements as well. All in all, I think a great choice for any kind of knife. 154 cm. So you do have this button here, and this is the lock mechanism. And if you look in the top, as I depress the button, you can see that sort of plunger move out of the way. And that's what locks the knife in place. There's also, if you look really closely at the bottom there, you can see where the detent snaps in, and as it closes to the detent. You know, detent's not great, but I think you got this great aluminum scales. I don't think you need a liner. There is no liner inside. Ergonomics on this are excellent. This lower part here on the handle, very hard cut. Same thing on the top. The jimping on the spine here, not a lot of traction there, but you get a lot here right on the aluminum handle. So a really good grip. You know, it handles really well in hand. I mean, this finger choil just feels awesome in hand. So definitely no problems with ergos. Construction, design, I think it's excellent. It really feels great in hand. I think if you're left-handed, because the button's only on one side, you might have a bit more of a problem with it. But for construction, clip's really good. Right hand only though. Tip up, tip down clip. It's kind of a Kershaw looking clip here, isn't it? Got the Hogue logo there. But the whole backside of this is just completely flat and plain. And it does have this checkering sort of in the front here. And the aluminum has got some tackiness to it. I'll say, you know, mild tackiness where there is some sort of texture to it. And it does grip pretty good. So, you know, for construction, I'd say materials used. The button lock feels very durable. It definitely opens and closes very well. Even with tightening the pivot or loosening the pivot, everything is really nice and tight. Lockup is really good. So what I've done is I've gone ahead and given it also a 3 for construction. Next section here for utility, performance. Well, you know, carrying this as an EDC and kind of using this as a everyday carry or, you know, around the house kind of knife. One thing I did find is, although this edge is really sharp, and as you can see, it's got a real nice mirror polish. It still has it actually. Came like that from the factory. You know, and it's hair popping sharp, but there is a little bit of burring that does occur on the paper, which kind of tells me that it's not as sharp. And also when you're going really into the you know, slicing of it, you do get a little bit of this ripping, and that's just because the blade stock is so thick that once you start going there, I mean, there's definitely going to be, as you can see it there, you can definitely see that it starts to tear just because this blade stock is quite thick. Again, you know, to compare it to the Sage, it's not that much thicker, but it's a lot thicker out in the spine, especially towards the tip here. It maintains its thickness, which does allow it to, you know, penetrate and pierce a lot better, but does kind of limit it a little bit as a slicer. You know, it does have a really nice slice, but when I'm cutting into things that are a little bit more rigid, it does have a little bit of a tendency to tear rather than slice. So for, you know, utility performance, I'm going to give it a 2. I think there's a lot better options out there for utility performance. You don't necessarily need a knife this large to be opening envelopes and packages. Something a little bit smaller might be better suited to that as far as utility. You know, CQC is the next section here. So basically, we'll do a recap here. For utility, concept got a 3. Construction also got a 3. And performance, we're going to give it a 2. So we're going to knock it back 1 on performance. And that's just kind of how I see it. So out of utility, you know, out of 9, we're looking at 8. So pretty cool. Moving on, we're going to look at CQC. You know, so self-defense, how this knife would flex that kind of a roll. And the first section here is deployment. And as you've seen already, deployment of this knife is pretty good. There is one little criticism that I do have, and that's these thumb studs, which are nicely stepped. The one problem that I have is they're not as what's the word I'm looking for? Sharp. They're a little bit soft. You don't get a real good bite when you deploy it. It's not like the Benchmade thumb studs that are a lot more hard cut. This one's a little bit rounded off, and it doesn't necessarily deploy as much. And you really need that with a heavier blade, just because you're pushing a lot more weight. But it does crank open. As you can see, this knife definitely has no problem deploying. The button lock itself, again, you know, if you take a close look right up in there, you can see that just the spring tension pressing against the blade is what really kind of keeps it in once you pass the detent. There's a groove in there that the plunger kind of sits in, but you know, so it's a really smooth operation all the way till the lock engages, and even then it's still really buttery smooth. And there's not a lot of knives out there that do that. You know, a lot of them, you know, especially before it fully locks, you do get sometimes that detent ball roll, or you know, kind of a jams. But this one is either open or closed. This knife doesn't really like to remain in the in-between stage. I mean, it's either closed or open. It doesn't like to partially engage, which is really nice. And I think that's one of the advantages to the button lock here. One of the things too that you see here is this little switch. This can be moved forward and backwards. And what that does is it prevents the button from being deployed. See, as you press it in, right? You put that little switch, that little plate moves over, and it stops the button from being able to release the blade. Now, the one thing that I do find a little bit frustrating with that is once this thing is engaged, the blade has some blade play now. Only when you're pressing the button. Obviously, when it's not, it's good, no problems. But when you press the button, a little bit of blade play, a little bit of wiggle. And I find that a little bit frustrating, because if this little switch is to prevent you from having the blade fail, it does have a little bit of wiggle. And you know, I kind of wish it was a little bit tighter. The tolerances on that could be short up a little bit. So, but still, again, for deployment, you know, getting that blade out, getting it locked up, I'm going to give it a 3 because it just cranks open. It really opens in a lot of ways similar to an axis lock. It really has that quick snap. Again, you're moving a much larger blade. Even if you flick the wrist right, you can crank it open as well. But thumb studs alone, you can also kind of press the button and do it, but it's not as effective. You know, so I'm going to give it a 3 for deployment, because in a pinch I can get this out of my pocket really easy. Doesn't have a deep carry pocket clip, and I know some people really like that, but for me, I like being able to have a little bit of it showing that I can grab it. You know, just enough showing that I can grab that knife and get it out. And the way these screws are positioned too, you get a real good purchase there. You can pull that knife right out of your pocket, crank it open, and get that knife deployed. Design, again, is the second section here in the CQC. And design is, you know, kind of like I've already said, in the deployment, you know, it opens really quickly, really securely. Again, you've got this great ergonomics here where the handle just fits in the hand really well. And it's actually one of the most comfortable grips I've had on, especially a large knife like this. I mean, the ergonomics on it are really nice. really grips the hand really well, and this finger twill is awesome. It's got these big cutouts on either side, and just really lets your finger get in there. You know, you don't feel like you're going to have any kind of forward egress. So what I mean is your hand sliding forward and possibly landing on the blade. Really good. This hard cut handle material in the back. Really, really, really nice. Ergonomically, this is one of my favorite knives, especially for big knives. It feels like a small, like it handles like a small knife, like it's quick in hand. Just really nice overall. So for CQC, the design, especially what you can do with a knife this size, you know, even in reverse grip, it's really nice. It fits really nice in hand. You know, it's a quick knife in hand. So for CQC design, again, I'm going to go ahead and give it a 3 for design as well. For CQC performance, on the other hand, which is the next of the categories here, and maybe I'll kind of throw those up at the start so we can have a look at them. But for performance, again, I think this knife is really great. I think the ability to deploy this knife quickly, use it, is really great. Where I do feel it kind of lacks, though, is it doesn't do anything for lefties. I mean, you can deploy this. I mean, I'm right-handed, and I mean, I can still deploy it relatively easily, and you can get the button with your finger and close the knife, but you're still limited to the pocket clip, you know, and the locking switch is on the other side too. You know, one of the things that I'd be afraid of is trying to operate this button as somebody who's a lefty, is you might accidentally, you know, hit that switch and not see it, or I don't know. You know, and also the texturing on the back end here is really flat. There's none of that milled out portion, just real flat. So, you know, I really like this knife, but I think it's limited in some of its design. I really like it for me being right-handed and all that, but you know, I could see that the performance, you know, getting that blade deployed. One of the things that I do find as well is when I close it, there's a little bit of wiggle within the detent, and as you can see here, the blade just comes out ever so slightly. That's the detent right there. So it does have the ability to get caught. It could, I mean, ideally get caught on your clothing, but as you can see, that section there is really loose. It takes a little bit of extra pull to get past that point, but as you can see, the detent is not great, and that might just be my model. I don't know if they're all like that, but just on mine anyways, it's how it came. You know, and that's one of the things that if this was riding in your pocket, right, you got it in your pocket and that section was poking out, and it, as you deployed it, it opened the knife or got caught on your shirt or something, it could do some personal injury as well, especially if you're in a rush to get that thing out. So for performance, I got to give it a 2 on that alone. Again, I think this knife is excellent. It performs very well. It's a good sharp knife. I love the blade design. This swedge here makes the tip really strong, so it could do a lot of damage here with piercing, but just the whole limitation of lefties out there, or if you're even right-handed and you're forced to use your left hand with this knife, I mean, you're at a huge disadvantage. It's not as ambidextrous as maybe some other knives out there, especially with the axis lock, and you get a very similar kind of feel. You know, it has that kind of smooth action. Final impressions, again, I'll give it a 3 because I really like this knife, just because of the way the ergonomics of my hand fits right into the handle. I mean, that's personal preference. For me, it fits really well. For you, it might not. I mean, it's a good beefy sized knife. The blade style's not maybe everybody's cup of tea, but it's very functional. You can't deny that. It's a functional style blade. All right, so just to do a quick recap here, under the utility section here for concept, we gave it a 3. Construction, we gave it a 3. Cutting performance, gave it a 2. For the CQC section here, deployment, we gave it a 3. Design's a 3. And performance, a 2. And final impressions, I'm going to give it a 3 because I really like this knife. Fits my hand well, fits my needs well. So out of 21, I'm going to give this knife a 19 out of 21. And that's it.